Hey everybody, and welcome back to American Truck Simulator. America's best truck simulator. Well, the only truck simulator, but in America, that is. Oh, sorry, I just whacked my mic then. Hope you guys are all doing well. I'm doing good. I think today we're going to go to Ketchum in Idaho, because we haven't discovered it. We've got a few places left to discover, and we go back across Oregon through some places which we've discovered. But well, let me have a look. Actually, is there anything else that is kind of a little bit? No, that's the same area really, and I don't think there's anything else that really picks up for anywhere too new. I mean, I guess some Washington stuff wouldn't be terrible. Then we could go to North Idaho, like Sandpoint or something. What have we got? Washington style. Yeah, something like that actually would probably be quite good. Okay, we'll pick that up. I know this is the Idaho DLC, but you know, Washington is and Oregon are two of my favorite expansions. So I love this kind of area. So we'll pick that up, I think. So yeah, I hope you guys are all doing really well. Oh, it's raining, just like it is actually in real life. Ooh. Okay. I think we need to put the windscreen wipers on properly. I quite like it when it rains, actually. I got to admit, it's kind of cool. So yeah, I hope you guys are all doing very well. I'm doing good myself. I know a lot of these videos kind of recently have been me kind of ranting about moving house and stuff like that. But I was going to talk more about work, I think, today. But to give you an update on the whole house moving, because I know everyone loves to know, still not moved. The only thing we're waiting on now is the buyer of our house, who is, I mean, I don't know what they're doing really. They carried out an unnecessary survey. It's a weird situation. They're basically buying to invest, so they're going to rent the house out, which is fine. They're going to rent the house out, you know, and have it as a kind of investment for their kids, you know, in the future, which is cool, makes sense, you know. You can carry out different surveys on houses. Some of them are like a lot more in depth than others. Now, the house we're selling is about, I think it's about 10 years old, 10 to 15 years old. So it's in relative terms, it's very new. And they carried out like a survey, which, where are we going to get out of that one? Yeah. Which, in all honesty, was for houses which are quite old, you know, like checking out stability and stuff like that. So I don't know who is advising them, because for those who don't know, you know, if you're that costs money. I don't know who's advising them, but it seemed a silly thing to do. Like, even our solicitor and our, you know, our estate agent didn't quite understand. But you know, you obviously can't turn around and say to them, "Hey, you know, that seems like unnecessary," because at the end of the day, okay. At the end of the day, you know, it's their money and they're investing a lot of money into something, and I guess, you know, they want to be totally sure that it's all okay. So yeah, it was a little weird, but that's kind of held things up because that's taken a lot longer for them to get results. And then there was a kind of query because it was something to do with, so to cut a long story short as well, the house which my girlfriend owns, which we're selling, is leasehold. What that means is that essentially you lease the house, essentially. You own the house. pretty much what you like to it, apart from kind of like, you know, external kind of stuff on it. But their management company looks after all the kind of grounds and stuff like that. There's a service charge you pay, and you know, if there's any repairs to the building of the house, say the roof needs repairing, they pay for it essentially. So it's kind of like an in-between of like renting and buying in a way. It's kind of confusing. I don't understand it totally myself, but yeah, there are obviously advantages to it, and it's not uncommon in the UK to have kind of leasehold houses. It can be a little bit annoying, but it can also obviously really help you out if that's the case. There was a little bit of a query from their side because in the survey it came up about people outside the UK may not remember or may not know too much about it, but there was a big horrible fire in West London at a place called Grenfell Tower, and essentially what happened was this big kind of tower block went up in flames from a fire, and it spread exceptionally quickly throughout the building due to the cladding which they used on the outside of the building for insulation, stuff like that, not being fireproof. It essentially spread the fire quicker than if it had no cladding. And there was a big investigation into it. A lot of people died horribly. It was awful. It really was. Anyway, that prompted obviously a review into cladding on tower blocks, on buildings, etc., and whether or not people were using this, you know, this kind of non-fire resistant cladding. And there's a lot of situations where people have had to fork out a lot of money on their flats or their, you know, things like that, because, you know, their building was not up to scratch, and they've had to kind of foot that bill. Now, we live in a house, but on our estate are also blocks of flats, you know, apartment buildings, no more than kind of 3 flats high, but they're around, and every place basically got a letter saying like, oh, you might need to check out your cladding. Now, it didn't apply to us because we don't have any cladding. We're a house. We live in a house. And it basically, the letter just said, if this doesn't apply to you, just ignore it. And to my knowledge anyway, even the other flats around didn't have any issues anyway. Like, none of them had their cladding replaced, and there's not been any kind of news on it. But if they had to, then potentially there was a bill they would have to foot. Anyway, that kind of got picked up in our survey, this letter, and I guess because they, you know, the leasehold company kind of give all the correspondence that they've had over, you know, in the past few years, and so they were like, oh, hang on, red flag, you know, cladding, etc. But then, like, common sense would dictate to say, like, you've only got to look at the house. It's completely made out of bricks. There's no cladding. So yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, it's just a weird one, and I get it. Like, people want to do their due diligence, and they want to make sure what you're doing is you're investing in something for a lot of money. You don't want to come out the end of it, especially I guess when you're investing that money for investment purposes, because when you think about that, like, you know, this person came, I know how they came into the money. I don't want to kind of discuss that to, you know, for their own personal reasons, but you know, it's an opportunity for them to invest and obviously have money for their kids in the future, and look after them, maybe give them a step up into the you know, property world, etc. And yeah, you don't just want to chuck that away because you wouldn't spend a few £100 more on a survey. So I totally get it. It's just obviously holding everything up from our point of view. So still haven't moved. There's me saying like I wasn't going to discuss too much about the move in this episode, but still haven't moved. But I've kind of come to terms with it right now because I'm going back to work on Monday. I record this on the Thursday morning. I go back to work on Monday, so I wanted to be moved in because it would save me an hour on my journey in. So instead of 2 hours, it would just be an hour, which is perfectly manageable. 2 hours is a bit much, but I don't have a choice. So, you know, I'm going back in. My cinema opens a week on Friday, Doesn't give us a lot of time to get things ready, to get the staff trained up and do everything like that. But in some ways I quite like that, because I like to be busy. I don't want to go in and just sit around all day. I want to have, a list of tasks and be like, right, I have to get these things done. These all need doing. They're all achievable. And I'm going to get them all done. And so really looking forward to it, actually. That sounds weird, because in some ways I was kind of dreading going back. I think I turned my windscreen wipers off now, because of the journey and stuff like that. But actually, you know what? I'm fine with it. It shouldn't be for too long. And I think sometimes, once I had the hope that we would have moved by the time, I went back to work, but it wasn't to be. That's just the way it goes. Anyway, I wanted to talk about work, actually, because I go back, and for those who don't know, I run a cinema, and it's interesting times for cinemas right now. There's been a few which have been open in the UK since kind of early July. It is early August, and they haven't been doing so. There hasn't been any content. There have been no new films out, really. The ones that have come out have been very kind of meh. So it's been tough times for those cinemas. But the reason why we're kind of reopening is because the big film Tenet is coming out, which big Christopher Nolan summer blockbuster film coming out. It's going to be really fascinating to see how that works. People's confidence in the cinema, I'm sure, has been hurt, because it's we're still in the midst of a pandemic. Whatever people want to talk about, cases going down, etc., stuff like that, we're still right in the middle of it. So look at me going 70. Portland. We actually do need to go off here. So I understand people obviously want to be safe and stuff like that, and it's not going to be like we're going to suddenly open our doors and everything's back to normal. Yay! If we got quite a large, we have quite a big flyover here. Look at this, it's crazy. Huh. This is the sort of thing that would terrify me in real life, but obviously in a game I'm like totally fine with it. I know these are probably pretty common in America, but stuff like this doesn't really exist in the UK. There's me completely forgetting how to change the camera there for a minute. Where do we want to go? We want to stay on this road, I guess. Yeah, this is kind of cool though, actually. This is kind of cool. Is that a stadium up there? Is that where the Portland Trailblazers play? See, I know things about sports, American sports. Just slow down a bit. So it's not going to be like a summer blockbuster like we're kind of used to, but I've worked in cinemas for 10 years. I was talking to our film buyer who negotiates all the deals for the films, and he was saying that he's worked in cinema for 27 years and there's never been a more important film for cinema than Tenet. How well Tenet does essentially dictates whether or not we're going to get any films for the rest of the year. If Tenet doesn't do well, then all the other distributors who release films will push all their films back to next year because they can't afford to take losses on them. And the cinema industry will, I don't know what will happen to it, because cinemas can't open on the levels that they're doing, that we've seen them doing over the last month or so. Some of them. running a cinema is very expensive. You know, things like rent, electricity, heating, is super expensive. Staff costing, it all costs a lot of money. Okay, we're not going along there. And if you're doing 10-15 customers a screen, then it's not viable for you to stay open. So I worry. As I've seen the worst case scenario plans for my company. They're not good, but there might not be any choices. It's kind of worrying times. What I would say is that if you can, as in financially and health-wise, support your local cinema, then please do so. I can't speak for all cinemas out there and say, cinemas are safe, it's fine, absolutely, because I personally just don't know. I should have gone down there actually to sleep and fuel. Shit. Oh well, can't do anything about that now, can I? Just have to do it the next one. I can't personally say anything about that. Every cinema, I can say for mine that we have a lot of measures in place to make it safe. We have a really nice big open kind of cinema, lots of space, so it's not going to be cramped and people won't be able to socially distance. Staff wise as well, we believe that they're going to be nice and safe coming back in, and I'm happy that to the best of our ability we're going to be as safe as we possibly can be. I can't speak for every it's a tunnel, it is, isn't it, for every cinema out there, but I know that in the UK there are certain guidelines that cinemas are expected to adhere to. They're quite stringent on things. They're changing every day, and people are having to adapt. Okay, we've got to pull into the way station. I've got a feeling I don't have my lights on full, because it does seem quite dark. I can't sleep here, unfortunately. There's one of those wood cars I love. Thank you for your cooperation. You're welcome. But I do also feel that every cinema knows how important a film like Tenet is, and no one wants to be the one that screws it up. No one wants to be that one that is shaming the rest of the industry. So everyone is putting in the work and the effort to make sure everything is going to be in tip-top shape, clean, safe, still a good experience for people going. So if you can, try to support your local cinema. I know it's probably a lot safer, a lot easier for you to stream these films and just wait a while, but in all honesty, the cinema industry, it's going to be on its knees if this film doesn't do well. So it's worrying. In a way, and also from that point of view, we need to be careful what we wish for, because I think in some ways, there's petrol and stuff off here, which means we're going off here. In a way, some people might be like, well, you know what, actually, staying at home, I've realised that actually streaming films is quite good. I've got a really nice telly, nice sound setup, and it's really good. And they're not that expensive, to stream. I can rent a film on Amazon or whatever for a few quid and stuff like that. And what I would say is that, there is no way that if cinemas don't exist, films will be priced at that for streaming. What we've seen in the UK with Mulan is Disney. What is this guy doing? What we've seen in the US, Disney have put Mulan on for $30 to stream. That is a better look at your future if there's no cinemas. Instead of you paying, I don't know what it is, $10 or whatever to go see a film, you're paying $30 to stream it at home with arguably inferior, setup, unless you really spend a fortune on your sound setup. It's unlikely you're going to have like 7.1 sound, and you're certainly not going to have a screen as big. Yes, you can watch it on your own. You don't have to worry about other people. But, it from a quality point of view, it's... we actually need to reverse, go in the parking spaces. I didn't see that first. Tank is full. Okay. I can't actually see anything. Oh, and my ears actually. Okay. I really can't see a thing. Hope I'm not going to hit anything. So I think up here we can park. I think. Ah, yeah, look, here we go. There we go. It'll be daylight at least when we wake up, so yeah, that's cool. Wow, we were very close to hitting that fence. Okay, right, we'll just skim through here and be on our way. So as I was saying, like the future of like film releases coming out, and it just won't happen that people if people are thinking that, well, actually, streaming is a lot better because it's a lot cheaper. Like, I actually think streaming will be a lot more expensive, because obviously what Disney are worrying about with Mulan is that, like, you'll get all your friends and family around to watch the film, and so they'll have, like, 6 people watching the film, possibly more, who are paying like $5 each for the film, rather than going to the cinema and then paying $10 each for the film. And then in theory it kind of makes sense, because they're they're not having to pay the cinema, they're just streaming it. But it also then perhaps hurts their sales digitally when the film comes out for rental or to buy, because at the minute the ecosphere is tightly balanced with films. You have your box office revenue that they get, then they'll have their films which will go to, in the UK, will go to something like Sky Premiere early or something like that, and they'll get that early for this is after like maybe 2 months of it being in the cinema, depending on the film, obviously. Then maybe a few weeks later, maybe a month later, it will come to be rental and buying. They usually are about the same time, and then eventually, maybe like a year later, it might come to like a free streaming service like Amazon Prime or Netflix, something like that potentially, or even like a Disney Plus, if it's like a Disney film. And so then there's these revenue channels which they get. If you cut the cinema out of that, suddenly you're losing a huge like chunk of the revenue from films. And films are very expensive to make. And you might say, well, I'm not that interested in these Marvel films, all their special effects, or these Star Wars films. But the truth of the matter is, they're the films that enable the smaller films to get made, because they make the profit on these big films, which they can then afford to take a loss on some other films that get made. So you wouldn't have seen some of the great films made. These companies wouldn't take a chance on them, because even the smallest film will still cost, multiple millions of dollars to make. They wouldn't take that chance on these films if they weren't being like, okay, well, we've got Wonder Woman coming out this year, we've got Suicide Squad coming out this year, or we've got these Marvel films coming out this year, so they're predicted to do X amount. It's a complicated and very delicate, fragile ecosystem, and it worries me that it's going to get interrupted and what that will mean for people in the future. Plus, I think going to cinema is just a good experience. Generally, it's a good night out. Sometimes people go for a meal before, sometimes they might get some snacks at the cinema or whatever, and people would bemoan like the pricing, but in all honesty, I could go into detail for the next 30 minutes about why the prices are the way they are, but as somebody who's worked in cinema for 10 years, let me just say that there's not much lower they can go until the cinema actually just doesn't make any money. You also have to think sometimes with cinemas, like, I used to work for a really big company called View, who had like 100 cinemas across the country. They're in like the top 3 of the country with like Odeon and Cineworld. The same applies for those two as well, is that they have like 100 cinemas, but at least 50 of them are not making money. They leave them open because the other 50 are making money, and as an overall balance sheet, it works out. You might be like, well, why don't they just close their cinemas? And that's because they don't want their competitors to take over that cinema. So and also, if cinemas close that don't take money, then you'll find that you'll have a lot less choice in your town. So the problem is, like, if you're in a town, you have 2 cinemas. Their competition is good because it will keep the prices down. If you take away that competition, then the cinema can just charge what they want, because otherwise you're being forced to drive elsewhere, which you probably don't want to do. So it is better for the consumer to have more competition in terms of pricing. And also just, if one of them isn't very good, you have a choice of another one, So this is really stunning, isn't it? Don't think I've ever been here before. Certainly don't think I've been across this bridge. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting times, like when I worked in London, we had things like terrorist attacks, not on the cinema, but within London, where we had to change the way we did things, and customer confidence was obviously slightly knocked, but honestly, nothing ever to this level, not even close. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this kind of reacts, and how it, what happens really, because the cinema industry, the film industry, does employ a lot of people. The film industry, to a certain extent, to a certain extent, will be okay because they've made these films. So your Bonds, your Black Widows, your Wonder Womans, they're already made. They're already finished. So if they release them this year, sure, that they'll want the money. But if they release them next year, that they're not essentially losing out, because they're obviously going to want their money this year. They're just delaying when they're getting that money. That makes sense. Not ideal. They will want that money as soon as possible, because otherwise they're not going to have much for at least this year. But their actual outgoing costs are not going to be as high. They can put film production on hold because they've got a slate for next year. The films that should have come out this year, they're just delaying everything. From the cinema point of view, who have rent to pay, staff to pay, all this type of stuff, it's not ideal. And I mean, sure, obviously the film industry have staff to pay and stuff like that, but in terms of like the actors and things like that, which are the real cost of it, when you're paying Tom Cruise $50 million a movie, if he doesn't work for a year, it's not going to be a problem for Tom Cruise. There's going to be a lot of actors out there who it will be a problem for, and I do get that. But hopefully the sort of unions and organisations will help them out. This is interesting, isn't it? I've not been down this road before. Yeah, so fingers crossed there everything kind of works out. As I said, another inspection. You guys are nuts. I guess we're in a different state now, so it's kind of understandable. Alright, we're going down here. So yeah, I'll probably do a video on it and talking about the cinema industry and stuff like that. I've always kind of resisted doing it because I've always wanted to keep my job and this separate. But if there's ever a time to kind of, I guess, amplify the cinema industry, it's now. My platform is very small, but I guess if there's anything I can do to help, then not just for me, but for all cinemas out there, it should be done. Because I'm not really thinking about the big wigs, the big companies who want to make their shareholders happy. I don't honestly give a damn about those people, and nor should you. They'll be fine no matter what. It's the workers, on the site level, the people who work behind the scenes at the head offices, who are getting paid very average wages, who are probably all wondering right now, am I still going to have a job in 6 months' time, 2 months' time, because no one knows what's going to happen. If Tenet comes out and does well, we should see a fairly strong film slate for the rest of the year, and hopefully it will build up, and by the time we get through to Christmas, really fingers crossed, this virus is on its knees, and we can hopefully enjoy somewhat of a vaguely normal Christmas. But honestly, in my opinion, without some sort of vaccine, things won't go back to normal, and that doesn't look likely until next year. So we'll kind of see what happens. It's scary times. I haven't been to work I haven't officially worked. Well, that's not true actually. I've done, every now and then they've brought me off furlough to go back to do some work, whether that's a stock count here or receiving some deliveries or this and that. But officially I haven't done a work week in we went middle of March, so middle of August to middle of March is it's going to be 5 months. That's the longest in my life since I started working at the age of 16 in a part-time garden centre that I have not worked for, and the longest by a long time. I had weirdly, maybe 15 years ago or so, I used to work for pubs, and I used to manage pubs, and I worked for this company, and the pub I worked at closed down. They closed it down, but they kept me on. I guess because they liked me. Oh shit, we went the wrong way. We reverse. There's a truck coming, we can't reverse. Balls. Yeah, they kept me on, but I didn't work anywhere for 2 months because they just didn't have anywhere for me to work, but they were still paying me. It was weird, and I hated it. Mostly because obviously I just wasn't sure what was happening. I didn't know if they were going to phone me up one day and be like, yeah, we're actually making you redundant or what, but it was odd. Eventually, obviously I did do some work, but it was an odd situation. But this is obviously unprecedented. So I'm very nervous about going back and physically being able to work, because I'm realistically going to be doing 6 days next week in a row, and that's going to take its toll. So I won't be recording any videos next week. Don't really expect any live streams. I obviously have videos all done, ready. I have enough for about 3 weeks worth of content with a video a day. Shit. Well, it was going to go. I thought it was going to go. Sorry, sir. He doesn't look very happy, does he? Yeah, so I'm all sorted on the content front, as it were. But you know, and hopefully by the time I kind of live stream again and do that sort of stuff, I'll have been moved in, because I guarantee that move will happen right when I don't want it to. Like in that first week we're open, guaranteed. Yeah, but it's life, isn't it? Maybe it's best to get it all out of the way with one time. So yeah, essentially, you know, fingers crossed, everything kind of works out okay, and all runs smoothly on there. But you know, as I said, if you can, you know, try and support your local cinema with the release of Tenet. By all purposes, it's probably going to be a great film. Christopher Nolan doesn't usually make bad films. Sometimes they're films that people are like, I'm just not into it, but on the most part, they're not usually bad films, you know. I personally love the vast majority of his films. I think I've seen pretty much all of them. You know, the ones which stand out, obviously, yeah, the Batman trilogy, I always really love, and yeah, fuck it, I'm going. Yeah, I knew it. Come on, Matt, I need the map back, thank you. There we go. Yeah, personally like the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Interstellar. I thought Dunkirk was amazing. Dunkirk was definitely a film that you need to watch in the cinema. I think Christopher Nolan films are definitely films you need to watch in the cinema. Like I watched Interstellar, Inception the other day, and it's a great film. I love it, but watching it in a cinema, seeing all those set pieces, it's a different experience to watching it. I've got a nice big telly and a nice sound system, but it's a different experience, honestly. Watching it in the cinema, and that's why cinema needs to keep existing, in my opinion, because there's just nothing like that experience, you know, that we have. So yeah, you know, fingers crossed. Everything kind of works out, but we just don't know right now, I guess, how everything's going to work, you know, because it's not like we're coming out of this kind of pandemic and everything's fine. You know, the UK just announced it's into recession, which basically means that our you know, GDP has shrunk for the last 2 quarters, and that's not good. You know, a lot of people are going to be very fearful of their jobs right now. A lot of people have already been made redundant. A lot of people in October, there's going to be a big spike, because that's when the government kind of help stops. I think they might extend it, because otherwise we're going to face a real crisis. But I also feel that, like, a lot of the time, that these companies, or at least the people at the top of these companies, are behaving like complete arseholes, and they're dumping people because they want to keep making the same amount of money as they were. And I think there has to be there are some companies out there which genuinely need to you know, make people redundant, or else they'll go under. And there's companies out there which don't need to make people redundant. One which springs to mind would be Arsenal Football Club, who made 55 people redundant. And if you... Can we go... Oh, for God's sake. Yeah, if you look at that as like 55 people, those 55 people, even if they're on 50 grand a year, which is very unlikely, but as an average it could be, because they did make redundant their like head of like scouting and stuff, who could have been on a fair amount. That equates to about 2.5 million a year. They will happily spend that for a signing on fee for Willian, a 32-year-old winger that they don't really need. So you turn around and go, okay, you've taken on this footballer. You could have kept 55 people's jobs if you'd just not signed that player. It's kind of disgusting when you think about it. It is completely disgusting. I would genuinely be ashamed if my football club did that. I really would be. But it's not just. But that is. I haven't seen other football clubs do it, but it is something companies will do. Is they will look at it and go, we need to cut costs. For some reason, companies always turn around and go, first thing they do, we need to cut costs. We're not going to make as much money this year. We need to make the same amount of profit for our shareholders. So we need to cut costs. How can we do this? Okay, we need to cut people's... yes, red. Okay, we need to cut our wages down. Let's make people redundant. Well, why did you have those people working there in the first place if you didn't need them? Oh, because you actually do need them. It's just that what you're going is saying we can just make these other people work harder on the fear that they'll get made redundant. Because they'll feel grateful that they still have a job. And so they'll work harder, do more hours, probably unpaid because they're on salary. And they'll make up for those other people who got made redundant. But they'll just be grateful because they've got a job and they can pay their bills. Meanwhile, we still get to make, X £100,000, X £1 million profit each year for the shareholders, who are all multi-millionaires anyway. That's the reality and the truth of the situation. And companies, these decisions that people make at the top, they don't think about people. They don't think about people's lives or situations. All they think about is numbers. Money in, money out. There are some companies out there which do look after their staff, do support them, and they're the ones who people should be looking at and supporting. And these ones who make redundancies, because when you think about it, look at how much money some companies made last year. So you look at banks and things like that, and they make multiple millions of pound profits each year, billions sometimes, and then you're telling me they're going to make 1,000 people redundant. It's like, this is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. There are some companies out there which, as I say, just are like, we were already on the brink. This is potentially going to send us over, and I get it. It's not all about trying to make the same profits. Sometimes it is about surviving. But for a lot of companies out there, it is just about turning around and going, how can we make more profit? I know this, like when I worked at View, this was a thing where it was like, okay, we made 70 million last year profit. How can we make that same profit this year, even though our film slate is not as good? We've got to make the same. We've got to make more money this year. I mean, you don't have to, but for the shareholders, you have to, right? And then it's like, well, we need to cut back on our hours, our hourly paid staff. And then it's disgraceful, really. It's one of the reasons why I left the company, because that sort of attitude is so short term, and like, why the fuck am I working for shareholders? Like, it's crazy. You should be working for the company. Be working to make the company stronger. People who work for your company are the company. Like, you're nothing without them. They're just empty shells of buildings. They don't exist. Invest in people, and that's the way it goes. And the company I work for at the minute, they do a good job of it. I will say that, like, a lot of companies really try to do a good job, and sometimes they don't always get it right. Sometimes it's tough to make a decision which will be to the detriment of your company, but it's for the betterment of your staff. It's hard to make that decision as somebody high up. If you are one of those people, like, long term, if you look after your staff, it will repay you. I've seen it happen so many times. You know, I'm lucky that I work with a group of staff who are very experienced, know what they're doing. You know, I have no fears about going back and staff not being able to cope with the changes and what's going on, because, you know, they're very experienced with what they're doing and they really love the job and love the place where they work. If I worked on a more disposable kind of way, it was just like, oh yeah, staff come and go, who cares, let's just pay a minimum wage and get on with it, I'd probably be quite worried, because they would have no investment in anything you're doing. Because if you can get one minimum wage job, you can get another. It's not that difficult. So, yeah. I don't know. We'll see. As I said, I'm going to be very carefully looking at what companies treat their staff well, and making sure that my business goes to them in future. And I'll be looking at what companies don't, and trying where possible to avoid that. Because, you know, in Arsenal's case, their owner, Stan Kroenke, made I think over £300 million more because of the pandemic than and then he's going, oh, we need to save £2.5 million by cutting these people's jobs. Like, it's disgraceful. It's honestly disgusting. It's so bad. It makes my blood boil just to think about those people who, some of them have probably worked for the club a long time, you know, worked really hard, probably love the club, support it, you know, it's their dream job working for Arsenal, and then they're just like, oh yeah, sorry, you get me redundant because we just need to save costs. And then, you know, 2 weeks later they'll see like, oh, Arsenal signed Willian for a, you know, £5 million signing on fee, and you're like, it's just sell our soul, basically. Let's hope there's some positive stories out there to counteract that, you know. And the irony, of course, was the Arsenal players took a pay cut because they were told that it would secure staff jobs. So the players took a pay cut, and then they still made people redundant. It's pretty shockingly run. Okay, let's play it safe. You go up here. That was quite a long one today, wasn't it? Yes, like 50 minutes or so. But yeah, hopefully you have a really good week. And hopefully your job is stable, and, you know, you can breathe a sigh of relief. But if not, you know, good luck out there. Cool. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. I'll see you soon.